with me now. Go with me now. I'm gonna take you down. Go with me now. I'm gonna show you how. Go with me now.
All right, so we're going to talk about inflation today, and to kind of warm us up, I'm going to calculate the inflation rate between 1980 and 2015. So in 1980, a Coke was 75 cents, but in 2015 it was $1.25. So to calculate the inflation rate, we're going to take the difference between the 2 years. So I'm going to take $1.25 and I'm subtract the 75 cents that it became. And then I'm going to divide by that original price of 75 cents and then multiply by 100. So when I do that, I'm going to end up with 50 cents as the change in the price divided by the original price of 75 cents and then times 100. That is going to give me 66.67%. So that's kind of a refresher as to how you calculate an inflation rate. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about inflation because we've been discussing it kind of vaguely or without much specifics. So inflation is simply a general increase in price level. We will express it as a percentage change in the previous year's prices. All right. There's also something called deflation. That's part of inflation, but in this case it would be a negative inflation rate. And so we would call it deflation. And so that's a general decrease in price level. We don't typically see that. When we do see it, it is a situation where the economy is not doing well and it's causing prices to fall. Okay, so that's not something we want to see ever. And then we have something called disinflation, and all this is referring to is a decreasing rate of inflation. So it's still inflation, but it's at a lower rate than it used to be. All right, so there's the three types of, or the three words that we use inflation for here. There is a fourth one, though. It's called hyperinflation. Okay, so this is a situation that could plague an economy that is usually a bad governance is going to print a lot of money, and it leads to hyperinflation. So we've seen it recently in Zimbabwe. We are also seeing it currently in Venezuela. And for whatever reason, governments, when they're trying to cling to power, they're trying to boost the economy by just printing money. Zimbabwe, for example, experienced not just 1,000,000+ % per year. They saw food prices increase by 134 million %. Okay, so they had some really massive hyperinflation. All right, in fact, here's the, oh wow, I was wrong. It's not 134 million, it's 353 million %. Jeepers. So yeah, that's really bad. Okay. That is crazy inflation. They were seeing prices double every 11 seconds. Is that insane? Whew. All right. So what causes inflation, you might ask? Well, it is simply just more money. That is the only thing. Okay, so prices will go higher when demand goes up. Sometimes prices go higher when there's greater quality. But where all prices go up, it's because of inflation. All right? I mean, because of more money. So governments that print a lot of money will cause inflation. Now, here's why inflation's a problem. Okay? If we have inflation, but we don't know it's inflation, it causes confusion. Okay? For example, did the pizza get more expensive because of inflation, or is it because everybody wants a pizza and they're driving the prices higher, or is it because maybe there's less supply of pizza and so they cost more? Well, if we don't know what the cause is, then it could lead to some confusing market signals. As a pizza company, you see the price go higher. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, you should just increase production of pizza to take advantage of those higher prices. But if it's inflation, that means all your costs go up as well, and it wouldn't make sense to do that. Okay, so that's why inflation can be such a problem. The biggest problem about inflation, though, if you wanted to boil it down, is the uncertainty that it causes in markets. Okay, it would become difficult for us to agree on wages. Consumers are going to change their buying patterns. It would be difficult for businesses as well as individuals to plan and budget. if they don't know what prices are going to be. And so that's why inflation can be such a problem. All right. If you look at historical inflation in the United States, it's typically, especially in your lifetimes, it's around 2.5%. In fact, that's kind of a target. Our Federal Reserve is tasked with the job of maintaining a low inflation rate, and 2.5% is kind of their target. Now, if you include the decade of the 70s, then that long run average is more like 4%. But we don't like 4%. That's on the high side. All right, so how do we calculate inflation? Well, we're going to use this thing called a consumer price index. Now, this is the exact same thing as the price index that we had already talked about. All right, but what this is it's a measure of the price level based on consumer purchases. Okay? And the goal here is for the government to track the prices that consumers pay for a variety of items. For example, in this pie chart, you can see all the different things that consumers buy, and those things are weighted accordingly to how important they are in the average consumer's budget. So housing is number one. Then you got transportation, food and beverages, okay, and so on down the line. The government entity that calculates this stuff is called the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So if you're ever bored, you can head on over to the bls.gov site and just look at all the fun stuff that they have that you can look at. All right? All right, so how do they compute it? Well, this is what they actually look at. It's 8,000 different goods and services. Okay, that's in 211 different categories. They do it across the nation, 38 different geographic locations. And it's used to estimate what the typical consumer spends their budget on. In a few minutes, we are going to calculate a price index using these three items: popcorn, Dr. Peppers, and movie tickets. All right? So to find a price index, now this should be review because we calculated a price index when we determined what real GDP was. But to calculate it, I'll review you. You take the current basket price divided by the basket price in a base year and then multiply by 100. All right? Then, this is new, we can find inflation by just seeing what the difference is in the price indexes over a course of years. So for example, if we want to know the inflation rate for a particular year, we're going to take the index from that year. So let's say we want to calculate inflation for 2017. We take the index from 2017 and subtract the index from 2016 and then divide by the index from 2016. And then that number will give us some percent. Hopefully it's around 2.5%, which is what it typically is. All right? All right, so let's practice. Here we have Jim and Dwight. They are going to help us understand inflation. So restating the formula I just gave you, we're just taking the change in the price level. We're dividing by the original price level and then multiplying by 100. So here is the example. Jim is complaining that cardstock went up in price. Dwight is reminding him that there is something called inflation. Jim is an idiot. And so Jim asks him, what was the rate of inflation? So if cardstock went up from $20 to $25, what is the rate of inflation? Dwight reminds him how to do it, but let's write it down here. The change in the price was $5. The original price was $20. So 5 over 20, unless I'm doing my math wrong, is 20.25 times 100 is 25%. So the inflation rate in that case would be 25%. Now that's just the price of one thing, so we can't really use that. We have to use a broad measure, and that's why we use the CPI. All right, so here's some more practice. Y'all go ahead and calculate these and then come back and see if you're right. Okay? All right, you're back. Good deal. Let me see here. I got to get out the old calculator so that I can give you the right answers on these things. So the way we're going to calculate number one, or the first one, is we're going to take the change between 1999 and 2000. So we take the index in 2000 and subtract the index from 1999 and then divide by that index from 1999. Then we multiply by 100 and we should get 3.36%. Okay? All right, the next one. In this case, the CPI has fallen. Well, if it falls, we have deflation. Okay, so you got to be careful there. If the price level goes down, we have deflation. If it goes up, we have inflation. So now you're going to take the difference again. It went from 149. Whoops, my bad. It went from 160 to 149. And, oh, I did that backwards. I want to do it the right way so that you get the negative sign. My bad. So, sorry. The difference was negative, so we take the 149 and subtract the 160. Then we divide by the 160. Multiply by 100, and we get negative 6.88%. So the inflation rate was negative 6.88%, or you would say we had deflation of 6.88%. All right? And the last one, if the CPI rises from 160.5 to 163, again, we're going to take the difference by taking the second year, subtracting the first year, divide by the first year, times 100, and we get 1.56% that time. All right? So hopefully that made sense, and you can do that whenever you're needed to. All right, so let's review how to calculate a price index. All right, so remember, it's the current basket price over the basket price in a base year. So to calculate the basket price, we got to add up everything in the basket and times its price, and then we get the total basket. So that's what we'll do first. So one popcorn at a cost of $4 is $4. Two Dr. Peppers at $4 each is $8. And then two movie tickets at $8 each is $16. That's a total of $28. Okay, so that's our base year market basket. In 2014, looks like a couple prices went up. So the popcorn is now $6, the Dr. Peppers are $8, and now the movie tickets are $20. So the market basket is $34. And in 2015, we've got the $6.50 for the popcorn. Now it's $10 for Dr. Pepper, jeepers. And then $22 for movie tickets. So that's $38.50. Okay, it's getting pretty expensive to go to the movies. So that's our basket prices. Okay. Now we're going to use those to calculate the index. So for 2013, okay, notice the formula says current basket price divided by basket price in base year. So the current year is the year we're trying to calculate. So for 2013, we're going to take the basket price of $28, and we're going to divide by the base year basket price of $28 times 100, and we get 100. So remember, in the base year, your price index is always 100. All right, for 2014, we're going to take 34 as our current basket price and divide by the base year basket price times 100. So calculating that, I got 34 divided by 28 times 100. You should get 121.43. Okay? So now why don't you calculate the basket or the index for 2015 and come back and then see if you're right. All right, so let's try it. 38.50 divided by 28 times 100. So 38.5 divided by 28, 137.5. Okay, so that kind of shows us how the price index has risen over time. Okay, and that's how you do it. Oh, speaking of movies, so the highest grossing movie of all time, if we just look at nominal dollars, it was Avatar, $2.7 billion. If you adjust those dollars for inflation, in other words, using real dollars, look what the number one movie was, Gone with the Wind, and it's $400 million more than Avatar. Okay, so that's why we do this. We want to be able to make clear comparisons. All right, speaking of comparisons, you know how old people are always complaining about prices today? Well, that's because they grew up in a time when prices were much lower. But you got to understand the dollar was worth more in terms of the goods it would buy back then. Okay, so everything costs more today, but we also make more money. So there's kind of a trade-off there. Anyway, we can actually use a price index to determine what things should cost today if they had risen at the same rate of inflation. All right? So we're going to do that, and here's how you do it. To calculate what the price should be today, you take the price in an earlier era, and then you multiply that by the price index today divided by the price index from the earlier era. All right? So we're going to practice that. Here is an example. All right, there's our formula. So in 1955, a McDonald's hamburger cost 15 cents. There it is on their sign. It says 15 cents. Okay? In 2011, that hamburger cost 89 cents. So old people are going to tell you that when they were little, they could buy a hamburger for 15 cents, and today it's 89 cents. Dadgummit, prices have gone too high. So is it really higher, though? So if we plug in the numbers, okay, you put your 15 cents times the 220, which is the price index in 2011, and then you divide that by 27, which is the price index from 1955, you actually get $1.22. So the 89-cent hamburger is actually cheaper than the hamburger was in 1955. And that's because, I guess, the rate of inflation for food has not gone up as much as the overall rate of inflation. So that's kind of interesting. You can do stuff like that. Here are some other examples. Okay, you're welcome to calculate these yourself. But basically, don't forget, you take the old price, multiply by the new index, and then divide by the old index. So for the gallon of milk, we're going to take the 92 cents, which was the old price. We're going to multiply by today's index, which is 231. And then we're going to divide by the 1955 index of 27. And so if milk had gone up at the rate of inflation, today milk would cost $7.87. Okay? It's kind of interesting. Gallon of gas, take the 23 cents times 231 and then divide by 27. A gallon of gas should cost $1.97. Okay, so gas costs a little more today than it should if it had gone up with the rate of inflation. Let's look at a stamp. A stamp cost 3 cents in 1955. If you multiply that by 231 and then divide by 27, a stamp should cost 26 cents. I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but stamps are much higher than that. Okay? Last one, an Oreo, 39 cents. Times the new index of 231 divided by the old index of 27 is 337. That's probably about what they cost. So some things have gone up with inflation, some things haven't. Some things have gone up more than inflation. Y'all probably are aware that healthcare and tuition costs have gone up at a greater rate than inflation. So if our pay increases, though, at the same rate of inflation, it doesn't really matter what prices are. So we always need to make sure our pay goes up. All right, so let's talk about some shortcomings of CPI. This is where we're moving into kind of a second lesson. So the shortcomings of CPI are that it does not count substitutions. So if the price of one thing goes higher, typically a consumer won't buy that thing, and so their budget isn't really impacted. But the CPI assumes that that consumer does still buy that thing, and so that it will overestimate inflation because of that. Okay, we call that an upward bias. All right. Number two, quality changes. Sometimes prices go up because the goods are better. Okay. In the 1990s, airbags added about $3,000 to the price of a car. Okay. Does that mean cars went up in price due to inflation or because of the quality change? Okay, similar deal happened here. This old TV it costs a lot less than this curved one. Curved one's nicer. Okay, so quality changes will tend to overestimate inflation. All right, and then lastly, we have a situation where the CPI does not place new items in it until they're old, okay, or they've been out a long time. Now, this is actually probably a good thing, but it tends to underestimate inflation in this case because consumers are still going to buy the new thing that costs so much more. All right, so a good example is this VCR. Okay, that old-timey VCR was about the size of your desk that you would be sitting at in class. In fact, it would cover the whole top of that desk, and it cost $1,300 for a VCR. Okay, today I don't even know if you can buy one, but if you can, they're less than $50. Okay, so if they had been placed in the CPI back then, it would have shown really, inflation. Okay, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. So the CPI is not perfect. Okay, now there is something better. So I want you to be aware of this thing called the chained CPI. The chained CPI takes into account those considerations that we just brought up. Okay, it does measure prices of new items. It does consider the impact of substitutions. All right, so it takes care of that stuff. Here's kind of the example of the difference between the two. The traditional CPI shows inflation much higher than what it really is. You can see the difference there. It's only a percent-ish. I mean, it may not even be a whole percent. It may be a 0.5% each year. But that adds up over time. So last thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about the cost of inflation. These are what it costs the economy when we have inflation. And you can read through these on your own. What we're really going to concentrate on are the money illusion. That's kind of a big deal. And then this thing called wealth redistribution. Okay, the rest of it, I mean, they're important costs, but I don't think they require any explanation. You can look at that yourself. All right? So let's talk about money illusion. This is when we get a raise for our job, or we're earning interest or paying interest on a loan. Well, here's the example. If I give you a 10% raise, but everything costs 20% more, did you really get a raise? Okay, the answer would be no, you didn't really get a raise. And so now we have this thing called a nominal wage versus a real wage. In this example, your nominal wage increased by 10%. But because all prices rose by 20%, your real wage actually decreased by 10%. Okay? So what I did there, let me show you. Okay, all I did was I took the change in your nominal income and I subtracted the inflation rate, and that gave me your real change in income. In the example we just did, the nominal change was 10%, but the inflation rate was 20%. That's how I got negative 10%. So when we talk about real changes in income, we're just taking the nominal change and subtracting the inflation rate. So that is what is meant by real income. All right? Here's another example. The percent change in real income is 5%. The percent change in nominal income is 10%. The percent change in the price level was 5%. So 10 minus 5 is 5. Okay? Here's one. You get a 10% raise. Inflation is 4%. Your real income rose by how much? Dun, 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 6%. Here's another one. This is more typical. You get a 3% raise. Inflation's 5%. You really got a negative 2% raise. Okay? So if you make more money but everything costs more, you don't really make more money. Then the next thing we talk about is real interest. Okay, it's the exact same thing as real income, except now we're talking about interest rates. And the reason this is important is because when you save your money in a savings account, you're earning very low interest, probably 0.5%. Well, if inflation eats that up at 2%, then the real rate of interest you're earning is actually negative. So in reality, in economic terms, you're actually paying your bank 1.5% to hold your savings. That's kind of a bummer, right? Here's another example. If I borrow money from you at a rate of 5%, but inflation is 10%, I'm actually paying you back money that's worth less than when I borrowed it, and you're losing 5%. So instead of earning 5%, you're actually losing it. And so there's a lesson to be learned here. Inflation affects people in different ways. When I borrowed the money from you, I didn't mind the inflation because I got to pay you back with money that was worth less. But you as the lender, you did not like that inflation because now you're getting money back that isn't worth as much. Okay? So this idea of real interest, we're just taking the nominal interest rate, say 10%. We're subtracting the anticipated inflation rate, let's say 2.5%. So the real rate of interest is 7.5%. Now, whenever there is unanticipated inflation, that will cause there to be this thing called wealth redistribution. So, for example, when you borrow money and then you pay it back, if there is unanticipated inflation, that means you're paying back money that's worth less than what they thought it was going to be when you paid it back. And so that's going to cause you to be better off. But the bank that loaned you the money is going to be worse off. If the inflation was expected, then no big deal. Okay, they would have ended up charging you a higher nominal interest rate. So whenever there's unexpected inflation, the creditor and the saver are going to lose, but the debtor is going to win. So you need to make sure you know this. Okay? So to wrap it all up, let's just see if you understand this. If Tom decides to save $5,000 in a savings account at a fixed interest rate of 5%, unexpected inflation would cause what to happen? The bank is going to be happy, Tom is going to be sad. Why is that? Because Tom thought he was earning 5% interest, but the inflation took away part of that. And so he's really earning less. The bank thought it was going to be paying 5% interest to Tom, but the inflation caused it to be actually less. And so that's why the bank is happy, Tom is sad. All right, here's another one. Erin loans Ashley $10,000 at 7% interest so she can start a pedicure shop. If inflation jumps from 2 to 4% per year, Erin's going to be sad. Ashley's going to be happy. So here's some real numbers. Let's look at these numbers, okay? So the nominal interest rate that they're accepting is 7%. Okay, they expected inflation to be 2%. So the expected real rate of interest was 5%. Instead, inflation was 4%, and so the real rate of interest was really 3%. Okay? Erin loaned the money to Ashley thinking she was going to earn 5%. Instead, she got 3%. That's why she's sad. Ashley thought she was going to be paying 5%. Instead, is only paying 3%. That's why she is happy. Okay? 2 more of these. Kevin signs a 3-year lease for an apartment for $900 per month after graduating from BL. Unexpected inflation would cause the apartment owner to be sad, Kevin to be happy. Why? Kevin only has to pay $900 for 3 years. During that time period, Kevin is going to get a raise because of inflation, and the apartment owner is going to have his costs go higher because of inflation. And so if he can only charge $900, he's not going to make as much money. And that's why the apartment owner is sad, Kevin is happy. All right, last one. I buy a house with a mortgage of 5.5% interest. If inflation jumps from 2 to 4% per year, from 2 to 6% per year, when the government stimulates the economy, I am going to be happy, the bank is going to be sad. The reason? Originally, I thought I was going to be paying 3.5%. But because of the increase of inflation to 6%, I'm actually now paying a negative interest rate. That's why I'm happy. The bank is actually paying me to borrow their money. Anyway, hopefully you got a good grasp on inflation.